This, by the way, is one of the great ways that I like to use AI is to say, here are my competitors. Wrangle up all of the sentiment around this category leader. What are people happy about? What are they unhappy about? And see which of those themes, kind of connect with your competitive advantages. And then you can really develop messaging strategies that pinpoint that. Because remember, as a challenger brand, your goal, your primary way of acquiring customers is to steal them from those category leaders.
Hi there. Welcome to the Challenger Brand Marketing Podcast, episode 1. We are super excited to be launching this new podcast. My name is Scott. I'm from Rocket Ship. We do B2B challenger marketing in the tech, government, SaaS, financial tech space. But yeah, we're an agency based out of Everett, but we work everywhere. And we're getting this podcast kicked off to help challenger brands, hopefully like you. I wanted to introduce Shannon as well. Shannon, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Well, yeah, I'm excited to get this podcast going as well. We've been talking about it for a long time, but let's see about me. I've been a strategic marketer for 25 plus years. I started on the agency side, moved into corporate marketing. I spent 5 years at T-Mobile, 3 years at Starbucks. T-Mobile, when I was there, was really embracing a challenger brand strategy. And this is really where I became familiar with the concept of challenger brand marketing and how it's different. Really, really passionate about that. I also just love branding in general. And so then anyway, after some years in corporate marketing, I started Rocket Ship. And we've been going since 2015. Yeah. I'm just glad to be here and excited to get started.
Shannon and I are going to be your co-hosts here, talking through just all the nuances of marketing and brand and the agency world. So this podcast was really born out of a desire to share everything that we're learning, and mostly everything that we're learning about how brands are differentiating themselves and winning and setting themselves apart, hence the challenger brand. So this is a term that we've been working from and refining, and specifically Shannon has built a ton of playbooks and information around. And so now we want to take that information and put it out there, give it to you. Maybe you have a challenger brand or you're working at a challenger brand. So the first episode today, we're going to be focusing really on why we named it this, which is what is a challenger brand? Why are companies challenger brands? What are the things that they're facing? How big are they? And so really culminating the years of experience between both of us, as well as what we've been experiencing as an agency at large, to help enable your company, or maybe even your own agency, if you're looking for direction on how to get companies in this space to the next level. So the easiest question here, what is a challenger brand? Shannon, that might sound like a weird word to some people, or they've never heard it before. So yeah, what is a challenger brand?
Yeah. And there's probably different definitions out there, like with everything. But for me, when I think of a challenger brand, my definition is, I think, broader than maybe has historically been thought, or some of the literature that is out there has defined as challenger brands. So for me, it's really any company that's competing with a larger dominant category leader. That's sort of the first criteria. And so if you just think about that, you can think of challengers that are way up market. Mm-hmm. My old company, T-Mobile, back when I worked there in the 2007 to 2012 range, they were definitely a challenger because, they were actually the number 4 position in the market at that time, going against, Verizon and AT&T and Sprint in that order. Verizon was the leader, and they had about twice as many customers as T-Mobile at the time. I think we had 30 million. Verizon had 60. T-Mobile thought of itself as a challenger brand, but still 30 million customers is really big, and they had broad market awareness, right? They had national media campaigns and spokespeople. So a lot of challengers aren't in that position, and I don't think they have to be a challenger. They can really just be, any company that has kind of risen up out of a startup phase or a niche, and now they're kind of going up market to a place where they're having to compete with bigger, more known companies that they weren't really having to think about before. So that's the first thing. Also, they're out-resourced is typical for challenger brands, right? Their bigger competitors have a lot more money, have a lot more presence.
Yeah.
I think it's also important that a challenger brand really has a growth mindset. So you can think of companies that might be in those other boxes might be checked, but if they're, they might be content, they might not really be trying to grow aggressively. So that's inherent in a challenger brand. And the other thing that I think is really common with them is that they're hitting a growth ceiling, right? They're trying to grow, but they're really discovering that what worked before to get them to the place that they've gotten to is not working anymore as they try to move up market.
Yeah, spot on. Shannon, I have a question for you. I'm a big story brand guy. Shout out Donald Miller. Maybe Donald, you're listening here. But I'm a big story brand, and as you're aware, we want to create the customer as the hero, right? When we think of challenger brands, especially as consumers think about challenger brands, everyone loves an underdog story. So if we're framing the narrative here, I mean, do consumers like challenger brands? Like, I mean, I'm a T-Mobile, but I never thought T-Mobile was a challenger brand, but I didn't have a lot of money 15 years ago. And I was like, hey, T-Mobile's cheap, so how do you think consumers perceive challenger brands almost sometimes maybe as an underdog, maybe as the up and coming, person in the space? I mean, people often gravitate towards more, fixed or solidified people in the space because there's less chaos, I don't know. But what do you think about that?
I mean, I think people love the underdog. I mean, so I think that's part of it, right? We kind of root for the underdog. You've heard that before.
Yeah.
What you're saying is certainly true, that those big established players that have brand recognition, there are a lot of people that just sort of go with that because they're the well-known brand, and there's maybe some safety in that. But no, I think that our human nature is to root for the underdog, and I think the job of the challenger is to get to a place where they really are at that underdog status, which is not the bottom. I mean, the underdog isn't at the bottom where they don't have any reputation and it's there's no credibility and it's high risk and it doesn't look polished, or like the user experience isn't good. Like, yeah, we don't want that, but the underdog has to get to that point where they can truly compete. And in fact, inherent in that underdog, why I think that consumers may like that number 2 position is that, by the way, I'm thinking of Avis. We try harder, they were that number 2 going against Hertz. Is that oftentimes the challenger isn't going directly, they're not marketing against the category leader. Their message may be really about changing the status quo. That's the monster, the monster child, or the villain, as StoryBrand calls it, right? The villain, and identifying that. It's probably not very tasteful to identify your competitor as the villain and attack them straight on, but it's more the status quo. It's like, what's broken in the traditional status quo of this category, and we're coming along as the challenger to make it better.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you spoke to it great. It's like they're challenging the status quo. I mean, nobody thinks of companies 20 years ago, but you could even think of Amazon in the 1998. They were a challenger brand, right? People buying things online. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard. And now, like Walmart was so dominant. And I mean, Walmart, I'm sure the Walmart family's doing just fine, but they're still making a lot of money. But no one would have thought that Amazon would be as large as it is today, right? Because it challenged convenience, the fast delivery, things like that. So, some
of us are actually old enough to remember Amazon in those early days.
We're going to get some books. Yeah, now I get my toilet paper and everything else from there. So digging a little deeper here, what are some things that are preventing challenger brands from growth, and why might they be hitting the ceiling that you were leading at?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. When I think of that, I mean, there's a multitude of reasons that could exist there, but probably the prevailing one that I see, is really that the brand is just isn't up to par. It's not, the brand hasn't matured or been developed to a place where it can compete with that mega brand. I like to say that they're as they're moving up market, they find themselves in a place where they're trying to compete in the major leagues with a minor league brand, right? Obviously there are gaps in the visibility because the big brands have more visibility. So that's a gap that always is there. Also, along with that, credibility and brand reputation are also not at the level of that big brand. Although sometimes on the reputation side, the smaller challengers, because they've got a smaller ecosystem and they've oftentimes developed more white glove service, more high touch type of service. And so their reviews are better. Sometimes the big brands, they've got thousands of reviews, but they're in that sort of meh average space, right? Yeah. Because in order to scale, they've had to probably make some trade-offs, in the customer service, and then people review based on that, right? So sometimes there can be, it can be a trade-off situation where, we don't have the broad visibility, but we might have an edge on the reputation. And so you want to leverage those up. Also, when you're evolving, you're moving up market, think about like when you develop your value proposition, right? The smaller startups might be working within a small niche, and so they're not really competing with those big players, and so their value proposition wasn't really even crafted to address that. Yeah. As they start to move up, now their value proposition needs to be stronger. It needs to address a different competitive landscape, or it needs to resonate with a more sophisticated buyer or a bigger buyer. Okay. Think about like companies that are trying to get bigger retainers or larger contracts. They're trying to move up market. Well, that can change the whole value proposition. Yeah.
As a big CRM HubSpotter, I actually think about this. It's hard to think of, again, what you were saying, it's very contextual, because it's like, just because a company's big doesn't mean they're not a challenger brand, right? Like T-Mobile, 30 million users. I even think about HubSpot, HubSpot versus Salesforce, right? Salesforce is the behemoth, right? And I see people jump and ship. Salesforce has this known archetype of just lack of user friendliness. Salespeople hate it. It's just clunky, and HubSpot did that. Like, they made it super user friendly, super easy, so that really resonates to me when I think of like someone trying to take a large market share. Like, there was obviously someone who had probably over 60% of the CRM market space. And then we have this HubSpot challenger come up in the last 15 to 20 years or so, right? So when we think of, like, I'm trying to think of the nuances of that, and you started speaking to them, but how do challengers win? So you started leaning into them a bit. Is it niches that they're owning? You mentioned reputation, because they can't, like, 10 years ago, HubSpot maybe couldn't compete with Salesforce on advertising or brand, or how much they invest in ads or something like that. But like, talk to me about, like, is it the messaging? Like, what is it there that helps challengers win?
Yeah, a number of things. As brands grow, they have to figure out how they're going to scale. Are they penetrating deeper into the market that they're already in? Are they going into adjacent categories? Are they expanding their product portfolio to offer, different things? So, based on that growth strategy, that's going to really dictate, having to evolve the marketing strategy, the messaging and the channel strategies as well. But so take niches, for example. A lot of the startups, I mean, maybe they don't even have niches. They're just sort of operating off of sort of word of mouth, or they're taking whatever business comes their way. It's very reactive. It's not very strategic. This is typical, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then they gain some success, usually in some niche, and so they can then expand on that. And again, they can penetrate deeper into that niche depending on how far they can go. Some niches you penetrate in, and then you sort of reach diminishing returns depending on how narrow it is. And that's where you might go to adjacent niches. And then there again, you have to think about, okay, I have to update my value proposition. I've got a different buyer, different mindset, different buyer journey that I have to be able to resonate with that buyer, because it's different.
Yeah.
Different stakeholders, right? So this is kind of, we really want to give relevant messaging. You've heard of this little construct: give the right message to the right customer at the right time.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
If we can do that, there's a lot behind each of those. What's the right message, right? Well, it has to be creative, it has to resonate, but it has to be timely. And so we do a lot of work with defining buyer journeys for every ICP or niche that you're trying to gain traction in, so that, and then you want to try to understand where that buyer is in their journey. Are they just experiencing symptoms and they're searching for information? They're just formulating ideas. That's sort of your top of funnel. Have they named their problem and now they're looking at different solution paths, different ways to solve that problem? That would be the middle of funnel. And then bottom of funnel is, I've decided on this solution path, and now I'm comparing different vendors who can solve that problem. So you can, if you imagine that, you can see how, based on where I'm at in that journey, the information that's going to resonate with me is totally different.
Yeah.
Right. And so what so many brands that haven't really, or so many startups and smaller companies, as they're moving into this challenger space, they haven't unpacked that. They haven't really dissected, and they don't have the systems in place to understand where their buyers are in the journey. And they're just trying to scrape the bottom of the funnel, look for people who are ready to buy.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that doesn't give them time to build trust. Right. And they're bigger competitors because they're big names, and their buyers are aware of those brands. They're at a real disadvantage if they don't start to try to build connection and communication with their buyers more up funnel.
Okay, got it. So yeah, I mean, this messaging strategy is really juicy. So when you talk about how a challenger brand can stand out and differentiate themselves, it sounds like it's really more around specific value props, maybe in the buyer journey, depending on where they're at, understanding what are the weaknesses of their competitors, how can they highlight, how can they almost infiltrate or take advantage of that weakness potentially, right? Because there's a gap in the market space, or even more, creating a new category altogether. Like we talk about, there's a great book about category creation out there. I forget the name of the writer, but talk to me a little bit more about how challenger brands differentiate themselves, especially against the big guys.
Yeah. Well, there's a book from years ago, I want to say probably around the 2000 mark, called Overthrow 2 by Morgan and DeVoy, where this was an older book, but this was the first one that I think I became aware of. And I think it was probably the catalyst for, in the 2000s, when brands started to identify as challenger brands, like T-Mobile when I was there. And it offered archetypes. So you can look that book up, and it's pretty interesting. The different archetypes that they've come up with. You can try to say, well, which one sounds most like our brand? Which one represents the situation that we're in?
Yeah.
But yeah, basically you're pressing into it there when you say, if you look at your category leader, and this, by the way, is one of the great ways that I like to use AI, is to say, here are my competitors. Wrangle up all of the sentiment around this category leader. What are people happy about? What are they unhappy about?
Yeah.
and see which of those themes, kind of connect with your competitive advantages, right?
Yeah.
And then you can really develop messaging strategies that pinpoint that. Because remember, as a challenger brand, your goal, your primary way of acquiring customers is to steal them from those category leaders.
Yeah.
Right? That's not the case when you're a startup.
Yeah.
In most cases, it's not the case if you're in a disruptive category, like an innovative service that there really isn't anybody else addressing. In those cases, you have to educate. Hey, here's a different way of doing things that is going to make your life better, but nobody else is doing it. So you're not stealing or trying to poach customers in a more established category.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is to really pinpoint where you can win and where you can change the status quo.
Yeah. You said archetypes. You mentioned that word, and you started going in it. Talk to me about that. What are archetypes, and what are some of these that you've identified or are in this book?
Yeah, I think the book, and I don't remember them all off the top of my head. I think there might be 10 of them or something like that, 8 or 10 of them. But the ones that do stick out to me is this kind of monster. Identify the monster. Again, in StoryBrand, it's called the villain.
Yeah.
Right. So and so this archetype is rallying the audience around a shared enemy, right? And that doesn't necessarily, again, it's not necessarily the brand itself, the big brand. It could be the status quo. It could be a pain point that people have come to accept because that's just the way it is in that particular space.
Yeah.
Another one is, maybe it's the inverse of that, but it's called like a lighthouse identity. And this is a big one. I see this a lot. Brands that are coming out of that startup phase, it's so difficult to to stay focused on your core, and you're trying to grow. You need the revenue, so you're just going to take everything that comes in the door.
Yeah.
But to really have this lighthouse identity, you have to be able to say no. You have to say, no, that's not who I serve.
Yeah.
And so what it really means is being clear and unapologetic about who you are in your messaging. It's the opposite of being all things to all people, right? And so with that comes, you have to be willing to alienate some prospective customers. And when you do this, though, it really acts like a beacon. That's where the lighthouse metaphor comes in. It's like a beacon that attracts the right buyers and repels the wrong ones.
Yeah.
And that's just paramount to growth.
Totally. Some of the examples we've talked about are some of these like large, all-consuming CPG brands like Walmart, Amazon, HubSpot, Salesforce. But no, it's interesting. You're speaking to how brands naturally attract or detract certain types of audiences. My mind goes to fashion, right? Like Versace, Chanel, people know just by the name that is not for them, right? And people who buy them because they want to be looking different. They want to know that sometimes it's like you think of money that people just want to throw away for status, right? It's like you're buying something because of what it symbolizes, what it represents. Maybe it's not the best thing on the market. Some of that stuff's pretty nice, but it's a brand can certainly attract and detract. What do you think about that, or what comes to mind?
Well, yeah, I think how true that is. Now put it in the B2B context, or like services context.
Elaborate on that. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem just gets amplified. You will you and I know this because we live it. We're a B2B services company.
Yeah.
And when you don't repel the wrong clients, when you just take clients in, regardless of whether they match your philosophy, your strategy, what you've built, those clients consume an outsized amount of resource because you're deviating from what you're trying to do for your core customer in many cases. And so it creates distraction, it consumes resources at a greater rate, and it really slows down your progress of becoming known as and being identified as the provider for challenger brands in our case, or B2B, or some, a lot of companies focus on an industry level basis, right? So it just slows down the process of becoming known, of creating that lighthouse identity that we're talking about, because it's diluted. It becomes diluted.
Yeah. So aside from some of these strategies, which these are wonderful. I mean, there's a lot here, a lot of really rich stuff. And you did mention using AI to analyze some of this stuff, which I think we'll probably just dedicate an episode to, because I'm sure it's on all of our minds, which is how do we leverage AI to scale? I mean, now more than ever, right? Companies can go against bigger people because of AI efficiency. So I won't go down that rabbit trail. So let's keep that future one. But
in the spirit of a teaser, let's just say one thing about AI.
Yeah, please.
Because it's so relevant to challenger brands. Because so you're a challenger brand, you're competing in a category where there's a big dominant player, and you're using AI to create your marketing communications, blog posts, whatever your website copy. If you don't use AI in the right way, if you use it like most people do, which is I'm just using it to save time, to cut out the whole drafting process, shortcut, the strategic process, taking human time and review loops and all this kind of thing. If you're just saying, hey, write me a blog post on such and such topic, how are the AI engines, the large language models like Claude, ChatGPT, whichever one you use, how is that content being generated? It's going out to the internet, and it's looking at the most dominant voices to create what it thinks is right, and those dominant voices are your competitors. So in essence, what you're doing is you're homogenizing your message, or you're doing the opposite of differentiating it from those incumbents. So I just think you have to be really careful. There are ways to improve on that, to mitigate that downside. I mean, for me, a lot of it is really to start with human generated content, do interviews like this where we're talking and the raw content's coming out of our heads. And, then if you have that raw material, now you can feed that into a tool, and you can have it polish and add anecdotes, or, add some research or stats or whatever to make it better. But it's still the foundation of it is human thought, right? So that's just a big thing, because I see that happening a lot. But I think with challenger brands, it becomes even more detrimental if you're not using AI in the right way.
Yeah. So to kind of get us wrapped up here, I got probably one more question for you. What is it that challenger brands are really missing the mark on? Is there something besides what we've talked about so far that you're seeing a pattern on, either in the market or amongst clients, that they should be focusing on?
I think it's what we just talked about a little bit. It's sounding the same as incumbents. I think that's part of it for sure.
Yeah.
And but it happens for more reasons than just AI. I would say a lot of times there's just a lack of a messaging strategy at all. So some of these things we've talked about, the whole buyer journey, and understanding who your ICPs are, and what their pain points and unmet needs are, and things like this as they move through their buying journey. So that's kind of what I mean when I say messaging strategy.
Yeah.
And so if I don't know that, then I'm going to have a hard time beating the incumbents. I would say it's a lack of that archetype or brand voice generally. That homogenous voice. The whole what's happening in the agency world is that there's a lot of hyper niching going on. And 95% of that is industry niching. And I think I'm not certainly going to say that it's bad to have depth of knowledge of an industry, but too often what I see is that it's a crutch or a substitute for doing actual strategic thinking. You know, and it's not the richest part of the strategy, right? It's not the industry, and especially when you're a challenger brand. So what agencies will do with this is they create a boilerplate kind of solution. I call it conveyor belt marketing.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we know what most companies in this industry space need, and so here's the playbook. And if you want in, you plug and play, and we do the thing and we repeat it really efficiently. It's great. It's great for the agency because it lowers their overhead and their cost, and creates better margins. But it's not always great for the client. I think where that can work is if you're in that lower stage, pre-challenger, where you're a startup and you just don't have anything in market. You don't even have the table stakes in place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So in that case, sure, go with a low cost, highly efficient kind of conveyor belt, like get that stuff up and running so you've got some baseline of web presence and that sort of thing. But once you move into that challenger space, then I think you need to be more strategic than that. So I think that's a big gap.
So I think from what I'm understanding, you say is like people have often been attracted to either industry or category specific services that support them. But if at some point that kind of rinse and repeat model will not get them to the next level. Is that what I'm understanding? Yeah.
I think that's right. Yeah. We see it all the time.
They'll just look like everybody else if they're just doing the same thing as everybody else, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And again, a lot of those systems, those approaches, they work for a while, but then they peter out.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of it. We've certainly seen situations where with more startup companies that we've supported, they have so many gaps that, it's pretty easy to get some quick wins.
Yeah.
Right. And so we get a surge of like, oh, this is great. Look at our web presence. We actually got some leads, and that can work for a time.
Yeah.
But usually once you really get serious about growth, and again, you're moving up market, you find that it just starts to level out, and you need to have more creative strategies.
Excellent. Well, Shannon, this is a lot. This is really juicy, a lot to think about. If I were somebody who's thinking to themselves, I think I might be a challenger brand, or maybe they want to understand more about how to overcome some of these challenges of potentially being a challenger brand, what would you recommend as a good first step to further identify and begin solving this?
Yeah, I mean, first I would say reach out to us. I mean, I'm happy to and willing to talk to anybody. No obligation. Just I like meeting people. I like talking. Challenger brands, pointing in the right. I mean, it may or may not be something that would be a fit for our agency to help with, but if we're well connected, we know a lot of folks, and we can make referrals and that kind of thing. So yes, reach out to, if it's not us, somebody else. If you have other resources that know about this kind of thing, it's just start having the discussion.
Yeah.
You could also reach out to us to get a demo on what we call our Challenger brand operating system. So this is something that we've developed to address some of those challenges with the homogenization and using AI in the right ways. So it involves really training an agentic AI system to know your brand, to know your buyers, to know their buyer journey, and then as you're having your marketing people and your salespeople and your external vendors all kind of contribute to the marketing communications output, you avoid that fragmentation that is all too common today, because everybody's just doing their own thing and using their own tools. So it really creates that unity and unification of message, and helps strengthen the brand so that it can resonate better against the big dogs.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I think that's awesome. Yeah, I think you're spot on. Anybody who's looking for some support here or looking for resources, there's an opportunity for us to either help or get you connected with some help to cross the chasm, if you will.
Keep watching come back to our podcast.
Yeah, we're going to keep talking about this stuff. So, well, Shannon, this was a huge pleasure. We're excited about continuing to talk about challenger brands, how we can help brands in the marketing and this space, and especially in the AI era. I'm sure there's a lot of percolating thoughts going on. But yeah, if you have a topic, any of our listeners have a topic or an area that you want to see us talking about, please comment, let us know. We want to talk about relevant things that are coming up in the space, and so on and so forth. But other than that, we appreciate the time, Shannon. We'll be back for episode number 2 shortly here. But yeah, thanks again.
Can't wait.
Thanks for catching this episode of the Challenger Edge podcast, where we help challenger brands like you navigate the crazy world of marketing. Like, share, and comment, or tag a fellow marketer below and let us know what we should talk about in our next episode. And we'll see you next time on the Challenger Edge podcast.